Very happy to welcome Ghada Almuhanna with us. Ghada is here today to share some insights as to how Saudi National Day has been celebrated throughout history. Ghada, you're a visual anthropologist. You have incredibly beautifully curated social media feeds with images from the Arabian Peninsula. In our first discussion, we talked so much about the representation of Arabs in the media and especially Saudis and people from the GCC. In our last discussion after that, we talked about the founding day. And so we talked really specifically about kind of how people celebrate the establishment of the first Saudi state and kind of the nostalgia that comes out. I'd love to talk a little bit more today about the National Day, September 23rd, coming up, the 94th one. Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about kind of the history of this event and how people are celebrating?
So, National Day is the day where we celebrate the unification of the country. And that's the, let's say, misunderstanding a lot of people have is that people think that it's the foundation of Saudi Arabia, where in fact it's the unification of Saudi. So basically, I won't go too much into the history. King Abdulaziz basically went around the Arabian Peninsula, unifying the tribes together and kind of saying, like, we're stronger together than we are separated from one another. And so we celebrate the fact that we have, as tribes, decided to like unify behind the king and at the same time is start, let's say, moving forward in our lives through the third Saudi state. So at the moment, we are living in the third Saudi state, the first one being in 1722, and the second one being, I don't know the exact date, but it's in the 1800s, like 1819 maybe, or so. I could be wrong, but I know it's in the 1800s. But yeah, we basically celebrate the unification of the kingdom.
I think that is a really good distinction to make. And as you mentioned, there is some confusion as to kind of what National Day represents because National Day, for some countries can be liberation. For other, there's so many different kind of, ways to define it. So the unification of the kingdom and its current borders since 1932 is a really good definition. And tell us how people celebrate. What is it? It's a national
It's a
holiday.
national holiday.
Um,
Yeah. It,
so what does that mean in
I
Saudi?
mean, it means a lot of things. A lot of people need to consider the fact that Saudis started celebrating National Day pretty recently. So I think in 2000, I'm not sure exactly when, but in the 2010s maybe, during King Abdullah's time, a royal decree came out that we would celebrate National Day as a nation entirely. So it's an official day off. So that was a, let's say, a new experience to many Saudis, because when National Day does pass, there is celebrations. Like, I grew up celebrating National Day, but not really having a vacation on National Day. And so many people think, oh, they never celebrated National Day before, but hey, they got a day and now they're celebrating it. And that's just not really factual, I would say. So what I remember doing as a child, and I continued doing through college until I realized I shouldn't be doing this, is like decking it out, screaming I love my country, saying, like, annoying people on the streets and saying, like, I am Saudi and I'm very proud of it. I still do say these things, but the thing that I don't do anymore is just annoy people on the streets. So I grew up in Riyadh. I am from Riyadh. National Day, the streets is all congested. You cannot, like, everyone knows you should not go on the streets on National Day because you will be stuck hours on end. And when you were younger, you kind of wanted to be stuck in the streets because you just wanted to be celebrating with everyone on the street. But obviously, you were participating in, like, the, let's say, the mischievous acts that happen sometimes, which not everyone would appreciate. And that's the part that I'm talking about. But otherwise, everything is nice and dandy, happy. Everyone's happy about, like, just celebrating and going out. My favorite parts during National Day is always the national songs. that get played. So like from Talal Maddah, Watani al Habib, which talks about like the love of the land and growing on the land, and like, oh, I grew up under the skies of this land and above the land itself, so I am the child of this land. And I love that song. I mean, sometimes when I'm really homesick, I listen to it and I start crying and I have like my own situation going on, but otherwise it's a beautiful song. And then obviously you have the national anthem, which is also pretty awesome to let's say sing through in some of the in these moments of traffic, because everyone gets so excited and you feel like, yes, this is the song. And the funny part, just one comment about the national song, is the national song is really majestic to hear and it's really beautiful. And but at the very end of it, and every Saudi national knows this, at the very end of it, the song kind of like fades away, and then everyone says, "Tan tan tan." And I love
I
that.
used to get in trouble for that at school.
but but I think it just adds like a like, I think it's a very nice add-on from the public to the song, that you learn this from when you were a child. So from childhood in school, you sing the national anthem on the line, and then at the end, just like wait for a few seconds, and then everyone sings in chorus. Dun, dun, dun. It's a beautiful
Uh,
moment. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's definitely it's definitely part of it.
camaraderie. It's a beautiful way of camaraderie. Yeah.
Can you mentioned the visuals that come out during
Oh
National
God,
Day,
it's
and if
crazy.
you could elaborate a little bit on
Okay.
that, it would be great.
Sometimes I feel like the public has like an unspoken competition every year of who can like deck out the most. So, and this is always my favorite part. So, who's gonna like have the huge printout flag? Who's gonna bring the actual huge massive flag on the street? Who will who will dress from head to toe in green? Last year there was a green, like a man running around in a green costume, and that was wild and amazing to just watch, because he's like, he was in like one of those balloon suits. It was all green, and he ran up every car and would knock on the cars and say like Saudi, and just run to the next car and knock the car and say Saudi. So you can tell his excitement. And I love these kind of visuals because it really humanizes the Saudi person. Because what everyone thinks when they think of Saudi automatically is these like very negative visuals. But like for us, when we think about Saudi celebrating National Day, it's always like this joyous event of like celebrating getting the green cake, getting the green flag, the green dress, the green shoes, the green bag, just being green all over. Even the little green lipsticks that are not actually green. They turn your lips pink, but the lipsticks are green. So yeah, it's a full on deck out, and I always appreciate these moments, especially when it comes to the younger ones, because it is kind of a way of teaching them their own um, of their own past, but also having them embrace traditional clothing. So it's always so beautiful to see everyone from all around Saudi coming out in their own regional clothes, holding the little flags, and like really embracing the national day. So yeah, the visuals are just crazy.
So 2015 is when the holiday was officially first celebrated. I think that's when it
2015,
became
yes.
a holiday. Like that's when it
Yeah.
became sort of like this is officially a
A
holiday, much
day
like
off. Yeah,
a
yeah,
day
it was a
off.
day off.
But you
Exactly.
guys were celebrating before. It was still
Yeah.
National Day, but it wasn't an official celebration. Then it was just like, we're
we
going to make
just
this
we
official.
just knew that it was this day that we could come to school if it fell on a school day, that we could come to school dressed up in traditional Saudi dress, depending on which region we're from, obviously, but we could come traditionally, not in the school uniforms, and we could just like celebrate it with each other. We have cake, we like sing the national anthem, and then just spend the rest of the day looking really cute and pretty in our clothes, because it was one of those moments where it was like, oh, you're from that region? I never knew, because we always saw each other in uniforms, school uniforms. So it is a beautiful added touch, because really it does show the diversity in the country. And you would be surprised. I mean, for me personally, as someone growing up in Riyadh, obviously it's the capital, and obviously there will be diverse people from all over Saudi
regions. I mean, this celebrates the unification of the kingdom, the Najd and the Hijaz. Is the holiday celebrated equally and consistently throughout, or are there the different regions? Do they have different traditions that they use to celebrate that may differ from others, but it's still under the banner of one national day?
The comment you said that it's to celebrate the unification of Najd and Hijaz, that again is like a misconception. So in 1927, the kingdom was called the Kingdom of Najd and Hijaz, just because that the king himself prior to that had the title the Sultan of Najd and Hijaz. That doesn't mean just two specific areas. That's the misconception many people had, because he just had these titles. And so that's why when the official change in 1932 happened, and the change to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that in a sense reflected that, okay, it's not just about these two regions. We understand that the idea that was thought probably before was that, okay, it's just Hijaz, which is the western side of Saudi, and Najd, which is the center of Saudi. No, it's an encompassing kind of country that, like, all the regions from north to south, east and west and center are all combined. So we all know that all of the regions are involved in this, because in the unification process, all of them were involved in this.
I was going to ask you, you mentioned that people come wearing their traditional clothes. And I mean, I know what you're talking about, but can you tell us a little bit about the variations of dress in the different regions?
I mean, I would have to send you guys the visuals to put them up for people to see.
We'd love to.
I definitely will do. Because there's a lot. I mean, please do consider that do have it in mind that every tribe in the kingdom has their own specific way of dressing. And in the past, when Arabia as a whole used to be kind of basically autonomous, not being ruled by anyone of the outside, the tribes kind of knew their own territories. And so for a way for tribes to kind of identify each other was the way they dressed. So, oh, you wear this type of form of dress that has this color of blue. I know you're from this tribe that belongs in the West. If you are wearing a sort of dress in the South, or from the South, so like, because the southern parts of Saudi, since they're mountainous, the thobe style that you see in the center of Saudi doesn't really fit over there. I mean, the older styles, not today, but the older styles didn't fit with the climate, with the environment, or any of that stuff. So they had to kind of, they did not had to, but they did dress differently. So they had different types of let's say, people of the South would put like flowers on their heads, whereas people in the center wouldn't do that. So that's where, and the flowers would be placed on, like, let's say, let me put it this way, it would be like a flower crown that men would wear, and they are known as like flower men. And it's a tradition in the south of Saudi that you don't see anywhere else. So that would be, let's say, something you would see on National Day, where the men of the South start wearing that. And that's really cool, because then you're like, whoa, bring in the culture.
It is a celebration of being, you know, a part of this nation and a part of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And therefore, I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about kind of how people kind of showcase that to other people all year round.
I'll give you an example. Like, for example, there's the font. You know that every year they announce like certain packages for National Day and the certain font for the National Day. And usually people pick up on that stuff and then apply it throughout the year. On National Day, you see, So it's not more about, like, let's say the physical clothing or the attire, because that, let's say, has different forms throughout the year. And I wouldn't say like someone from Asir would dress green on National Day and then would dress green on any other day, because sometimes like a piece of fabric is just a piece of fabric, you know? But I think what matters is like when you wear that piece of fabric on a specific day to represent something, then you're giving it meaning. So the meaning of green on National Day green has meaning on National Day because it represents National Day. But I think on any other day, it's just a color if it doesn't have the Saudi emblem, for example. So like you would find a dress that would have the Saudi emblem. That's something that represents national pride, I would say. Fonts that in the packages, the graphic designs that you see ministries issue is also part of that. Dara every year, which is so fascinating. So Dara is the King Abdulaziz Foundation for Archives and Libraries, which is basically like the let me put it this way, like the archive of the nation. And I love waiting for their post before National Day. So they usually post it like a week or two before, about the guidelines for not just the guidelines for National Day, but also like historical points of National Day. And I love it because I mean, it's this almost the same every year. But what I find beautiful is when they emphasize certain things for every year. So, for example, I still haven't read this year's, to be honest. I was busy with my master's thesis. But I know last year's was like about pride in nation and love of nation. And they had quotes from King Abdulaziz representing that. So they would go into the archives, pull out these quotes and put them in the document, then publish it. And people would be able to see that document and then utilize the quotes, utilize the information, take whatever they need from it to produce their own videos, their own content, to produce their own way of, let's say, loving the nation. That's why another thing that I love about National Day is also the videos that come out from all the companies and all the ministries. And it is a competition. Like, I don't care what anyone says. It's a yearly competition about who makes the best visuals. And it's wild. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone says like the budgets for National Day videos is really high, because you could see the high quality production in them, and it's just so good. And then sometimes certain videos really take you by surprise. So like Maestro a few years ago made this like the most beautiful National Day video. They had this guy in the middle of like an abandoned place playing oud, and then the walls would like lighten up and would show you the unification path that King Abdulaziz took, and then would like quotes coming out and saying like reflecting the song, which is like I am from this country and so and so and so, and then it would just be a beautiful representation, and then these words would fly around this like place, curve around like a girl dancing, you know. It was so beautiful, it was so well made, and it was one of these visuals that really broke a lot of stereotypes of Saudi, because many people were like, oh my god, finally I see a video that represents me, and finally I see something that like reflects what my day-to-day is. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
I think it's so interesting in the comparison, because I've now made it twice in this episode, comparing Saudi National Day with July 4th. And it's interesting because the events are similar in how they're celebrated now. Day off, nobody's working. Everyone just, adorns the red, white, and blue, or in Saudi Arabia, the green. It's a moment for national pride. So the way that they're celebrated is somewhat similar, I would say. But they actually represent two very different events. I mean, if this is the formal unification and establishment of the Saudi state, the modern Saudi state as it is, as it was 1932, and it still is, July 4th was a declaration of independence. It was not something that signaled unity for anything except for hatred of the British and the monarchical rule of the British Empire. Actually, what it represented was a very, very loose confederation of states that only had that in common. And that was 1776. I mean, then the Articles of Confederation, 1781. So we're talking 5 years after that, in the middle of the war, the Revolutionary War. It wasn't for another 8 or 10 years that they wrote the Articles of Confederation, which was sort of the pre-U.S. Constitution. And, then the U.S. won the war, 1783, Treaty of Paris, still represented a very loosely confederated system of states. Whereas Saudi Arabia, this is what is being celebrated today is the solidification of the Saudi state. I think it's a really important kind of thing to sort of put out there, because they're different celebrations totally, and yet now they seem very similar. I just wonder if that resonates with you guys, having some American background. I mean, I'm so American that I got a cut the other day and an entire hot dog fell out of my wound. So I'm kind of just looking at it through that lens where I'm like, they're very similar celebrations now, but in fact, Saudi Arabia's is what we should be celebrating. It shouldn't be 1776. It should be 1787 or 1791. And it's just something that I think Saudis should be proud of, whereas Americans are still like obsessed with this date where we told the British to go away. I don't know if that resonates with you guys at all, but it just strikes me as this is more of a real national holiday than July 4th is. I mean, there was so much work to be done after July 4th. I just think that's an interesting kind of comp.
Yeah, Hannah, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I just thought it was interesting.
Just my comment is, I think that's a really I haven't thought about it that way, but I think what's really interesting about what you just said is that so much of the work was done beforehand with Saudi Arabia, as you said, that it was there was a lot of work, right? And it wasn't kicking out the Brits or the Turks, or it wasn't that. It was more about, let's share this together and work together in order to make it a more prosperous, peninsula, country, whatever, for everybody that's here. And so by uniting together, instead of fighting, we're going to make this a better country. And by the way, we as Sauds will be, responsible for building the institutions to make it a safer place for everybody, a better place, a more predictable place. And we'll do this by upholding the values that we all share together. And so I do think a lot of that work was done beforehand. And it wasn't necessarily, there were fights, there were battles. We talk about them in our history books, we read about them. But at the end of the day, it was unified, and that is what we're celebrating. And it also, what I love about kind of that day and the unification of Saudi and the establishment of the third Saudi state, is that it froze a lot of things in time in terms of where the beef was between the different tribes. And that it changed the relationship between a lot of them. So instead of fighting, it just became like, okay, well, now we know where the borders are. We know where, kind of your different tribes kind of reside today. And this is where we'll attribute kind of certain geographic areas to different tribes, even if before they were much more nomadic and would roam around the Arabian Peninsula and actually just around the Middle East even more. So I think that that's another really interesting date to put in the calendar. Like, it's a time when a lot of those hostilities kind of dissipated because it became more predictable and it became easier to understand like where boundaries were. I don't know if you agree with me, Ghada. What do you think?
I mean, I would agree with you to an extent. The way I see it, for me personally, when I look into Saudi's history, I immediately identify that there was like never a sort of colonization or like a sort of imperialization of the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, you did have certain influences, obviously, and they are written about, but not to the exaggerated extent that many people believe in, And I think because of that, there is a sense of pride of never having to have fallen for anyone. And I need to say this quite truthfully. There was a Greek historian, I don't know when, but like very, very old. And I know today I'm so bad with dates, you guys. I'm very sorry. But he's a very, very old historian, and he had documented, let's say, the peoples of the region. And this was like at the time of the old world. America wasn't discovered. No one was, like, many areas weren't discovered yet, and it was just this little area of the old world. And this historian said that the Arabs were the most difficult to have sires above. They are very pride people, and they reject being ruled or being governed by anyone other than their own blood or their own people. And I think that is true, and it carried on for such a long time. And I mean, the nature of nation building and the nature of statehood as such, I mean, we enter into the 19th century, most countries started to be or to exist, borders started to existing. So the reality of needing to have borders, to have a state, to call something my home, I think just became more and more realistic to the Arabian tribes. So when King Abdulaziz started going one region after another and saying to the tribal sheikhs or to the tribal men, we only have each other, I think that became the reality of, okay, we need to understand that, or we have this understanding that we will all start to come together, unify behind King Abdulaziz, because we believe he's the one who's going all around and convincing all of us to join into his kingdom. I always tell people, like, when you think of the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's not truly the relationship in a sense of like a king and their subjects. It never felt that way, really. It was more. There was always this understanding in society that this royal family is from us and we are from them, and they will not do anything without thinking about us, and we won't do anything without thinking about them. And in this kind of brotherhood way of looking at things, the people decided that this family is the one that's going to govern things, and the people are fine with that. And yeah, I think that's just how it happened, and I think that's our relationship to National Day. It's not to celebrate Saudi as like what people would think, like, oh, celebrating the family and so on. It's celebrating with the family for the foundation or for the unification of the state. Kind of like, we did it, you guys. This is so cool. We're still doing it.
I really love the way that you just put that. I think that's
cool.
Absolute. That's right. That's just right. I think that it's super important to mention that, because I don't think a lot of people get that.
No, I don't think so.
And I think that most people really actually have a very opposite view of it. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And like when you speak to especially older generations that really lived through some of that transformation, they really, there's a lot of love and support for the Al Sauds as the rulers of the kingdom because of the way they were able to bring everybody together. And they got, people out of dire poverty. They really just transformed. And I mean, look where we are today. They transformed the kingdom and are continuing
in a very fast
to invest
way. And that's what I keep reminding.
Incredibly fast.
That's what I always keep reminding everyone, is that please do consider that this country started not more than 97 years ago. It's 94 years ago. It's pretty recent. I mean, if you count from 2027, it's 97 years ago.
Right. No, but I mean, we're celebrating the 94th National Day, so I just feel like we should go with that number.
Let's go with that number. But yeah, I just genuinely do believe that really so many people have lots of misconceptions about National Day, and so many people just have this just huge misunderstanding with the history of the country.
but it's not just the the ruling by unification. It was also in practice, right? I mean, leaders at the time, and still until almost modern day, there would be weekly majlises where people could come and talk to their rulers about what was going on. In that way, it was very inclusive because it kept the rulers in touch and in touch with real problems, solving disputes, but also it kept the leaders kind of in tune to what people needed and wanted. I think that's something that other Khawajas miss all the time about it.
I have another question before we wrap up. And like Lucien mentioned hot dogs. And so I feel like we need to think, again, in slight parallels, which we know that it's very different. But what are people eating on Saudi National Day?
Great question.
Jirish?
You know.
Are you eating jirish?
I love jirish. I love jirish so much. No, I mean, I love my regular kabsas for sure. Yesterday, I had the biha, which was delicious. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, there's the sweet stuff. Like I'm gonna be a very biased person. I'm gonna say all the Qasimi dishes, you know, like kleja, hneni, dates.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna have to. I'm gonna have to come back at you guys and just be like, they're also eating khlas dates, but they're also they're also eating.
If all the Qasimi dates run out, they'll go to khlas.
No. Are you kidding? Dude, you know that the largest palm oasis is in Al Hassa.
That's very true, but we still have the better dates.
Yeah. I'm an independent observer.
So not true.
You can immediately tell.
I think you've just spent more time in Riyadh, and so obviously people are going to throw sukkari at you, but like, come try khlas rutab right off of the palm tree.
This is why you don't bring a date conversation between a Qasimi and a Hassawi.
You know, this is our household. Like, I have my husband.
We have a battle. We have a battle plan every year. How to dominate the date market, and we're still doing it. So,
I mean, honestly, again, come try khlas rutab, fresh. No, I'm telling Lucien because he's the independent observer, fresh off of the palm trees, and you will see the difference. Personally, I will tell you that there are certain types of sukkari that I prefer. Certain preparations of sukkari that I prefer to khlas for sure. But rutab, for me, the fresh dates off the tree, sorry. Anyway, but also like not in like, you know, the dates, which obviously are better in Hassa. There's also like the Saudi dishes from the different regions. And I was just recently in Al Khobar, and I visited the Culinary Academy, Zadok, and I spoke with a bunch of chefs that were actually from Tabuk. And they were talking about how when they came to the Eastern Province to do their course at Zadok, so many of the dishes that they also ate were prepared so differently. So their jirish is has a different flavor to the jirish that we're preparing in the Eastern Province, to the jirish that you're preparing in Najd, to the one that you would get in Jeddah. So everybody eats it, but it's very different. And maybe we're more accustomed to the bigger city dishes and their flavors and the way they're prepared differently in the big cities. But especially when you start going out into kind of the regions that are less populated and just, you know, it gets really interesting. So I think people are eating their regional foods and the regional preparations of the Saudi foods.
Definitely.
Which I think is,
I mean, you see it and like you see the national food coming out on 3 days. No, wait, on 3 occasions. The first one is National Day. The second one is Founding Day. The third one is the whole month of Ramadan. You just see all national dishes coming out in Ramadan full force. Like, we need to feed everyone. So yeah.
Very true. You know, I don't know. There's like a couple like of my favorites that I don't know that you've tried, Lucien, but you should definitely, when you're in Saudi next, go for some silig, because that's one of the harder ones to get outside of Saudi Arabia.
That's very true. It's even though it's a very simple dish, it's very difficult to make. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I understand the accusation. Is it that you think that I'm just getting the Sukri Qasimi dates because what? I'm going to Riyadh, and so proximity, or is it the smart Qasimi business minds that know to put it in front of me, or what are we looking at here?
Proximity.
Is that it? Okay.
Proximity.
Well,
proximity and the fact that we like have many shops in Riyadh titled like, I'm not joking. Growing up in Riyadh, like, was there are like 3 known neighborhoods in Riyadh that are known as the neighborhoods where the Qassimis live. And when you go to these neighborhoods, you will see the markets with just the dates, and you will see like all these things. So the people of Riyadh just have a lot more access to these.
Jarish is so good. If somebody gave me a bowl of Jarish right now, I would leave this conversation and sit somewhere else so no one could watch me eat it, and I would just go to town on it.
What about, but like, so also haris, which is like Jarish, but then you pound it. And that, like, I remember like watching like my aunt and grandma prepare that. Like if there was a big party, they just get this huge pot full of, you know, the cooked wheat, and they would just like with a huge stick, like it was like a cricket bat almost, and it just it was so much work. It was such like a labor of love, and then it was, you know, absolutely delicious afterwards. But maybe I think I'm getting really hungry. Maybe
I'm like starving.
I think it's important to think about what people are eating as well. And I think this is where we have to tell people to come and visit Saudi, because Saudi food is so incredibly diverse. And obviously we all are very proud of our food from the different regions, and our fruit dates from the different regions. So you need it, because like if we had somebody from Medina on here, like this would have gone in a different direction.
This would have been a battle for the dates.
It would have been.
Yeah. And we would have won.
So yeah, I think so. Maybe I would have been coming first, but then, you know, you right. Okay. Ghada, thank you as always. This was fascinating.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your insights. Really valuable.
You're the best. Thanks again. This was great.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
The 2030.